Hello, welcome back everyone to DSP Leaders World Forum 2023 and the first session of the afternoon. So please come on in, take a seat. Make sure you've got a nice coffee there, nice warm coffee. We won't start until you've got your coffee. Right, welcome back. Our next session is going to look at why data and APIs are key to implementing the vision of the DSP, the Digital Services Provider. And to successfully enable new services required for future growth, telcos do need to open up and expose their networks to applications developers. But are APIs the best way to go about this? And how do telcos get developers involved? And what role will DSPs play in enabling digital businesses? Well, with a bit of pinball action in the background, let me now introduce our co-host for this session. I'm delighted to say Juan Garcia is joining us today, who is SVP Technology and Ecosystem at Telefónica. Very good to see you. Are you looking forward to a good discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Guy. So I'm also looking forward having this session with all these partners.
Well, you know, it's such a fantastic topic and very topical as well. It's good that we're having this now. First of all, let me introduce the rest of our guests then on the panel, starting from my far right. If we can just give our names, job titles and companies, that would be great. So, Hanan.
Thank you for the invitation. Hanan Garcia, Global Telco Solution Manager at Redhats.
And you're a returning panelist, Hanan.
Yes, so I don't have the question.
And next to Hanan.
Alexandra Foster, BT Division X.
And your first time at DSP, are you enjoying it so far?
First time at DSP, yes. I mean, it's brilliant, from pinballs to people to all of the excitement. Yeah, no, it's excellent.
Thanks very much. And Sean.
Sean Hockel, I'm a VP of Engineering within the Azure for Operators group at Microsoft.
Well, it's good to see you in person, Sean. First time in Windsor?
In the last 20 years, yes.
Excellent. Not much has changed in Windsor, I don't think. And on my left.
So I'm Asfar Aslam, CTO for Nokia in Europe.
And have you had a try at pinball yet?
Not yet, but I've heard a lot about it.
Oh, excellent.
Expectations are very high.
The trophy's got your name on it already, eh?
Absolutely.
Yep. Hi, everyone. It's Sandy Prathartha. I'm looking after strategy, innovation, and 5G IoT at Virgin Media O2 Business.
Another seasoned panelist from our online sessions. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
And Maria.
Maria Lema. I'm a founder at Weaver Labs.
Great. It was good to have you back with us because you were here with us last year on a session. Yes. Right. Before we get into the actual discussion, I would love for Juan Carlos to go to the lectern and give our DSP leaders address. Please, Juan Carlos.
Thank you. Well, I was asked to start with 5 minutes to give my view on why API and data were so key for the telco digital services, and I only have a problem that is sticking to 5 minutes, no? Because this topic, is so interesting that can take 4 hours, no? Nevertheless, we will have 1 hour later on for discussions, so I will try to give you some context for this panel with the history behind all these APIs and data in a company like Telefónica. That can be also a good example of what the telecom industry has been doing in the last years. No? So telcos have been working for long years to try to become digital services provider. If you know, Telefónica and also many other companies 10 years ago had subsidiaries with the name digital, no, behind. And so this means that we are trying to do this for a long time, okay? And we were not successful at that time, so 10 years ago, because there were some blocking factors. No? The first one is the technology was not ready. Okay, our networks were still legacy networks, very rigid, still not open, not offering service-based architectures, not software-based, not based on cloud, not having the flexibility, really to expose their capabilities. So technology was one of the topics, and this make these first tries to limit, to expose certain capabilities on the service platforms, but not really all the telco capabilities and the telco potential. The second is that the market was not ready. No? The customers still have not gone through the digitization process. Most of them still not using the cloud, still not used to interact with partners using programming interfaces, and it was hard to sell this as well. And finally, the telco industry probably was not prepared at that time also to give the step. No? And playing the way we collaborate, there were some still things missing, no? Like the collaboration with the wider industry, no? with customers, with potential partners, with technology providers, in something that is absolutely required when you develop digital services. This is something that you can not do on your own. So you need to work very closely with the customers, in this case with the developer communities. And I think we failed at that time, okay? Nevertheless, things have happened in the last years that have prepared probably the ground to give the next step, no? And try once again, it is not the first we try to launch API services, but now we are getting into this new try with a much higher confidence, okay? And the reason for this is all the work we have done in the last years, no? In 2017, Telefónica, probably you remember, Telefónica launched something we called the fourth platform. That was a data and capability exposure layer on top of the other three platforms. Okay, the other three platforms were the network, the IT, and the services. That was providing a kind of intelligence, no, on top of them, collecting the data from these three platforms, optimizing the way network, IT, and services were working, and not only that, also exposing information and capabilities to the customers so that they could somehow better integrate with the telecom operators and use their capabilities. So all this experience has taken us to have this platform now called kernel, ready to expose APIs. Okay? We have already used it to expose to other digital service providers to be able to integrate their services on our platforms. And I'm talking about platforms like our TV platform, our IoT platform. All of them are already API-fied, and our partners can get access to them through APIs. The second important I would say, fact is that in 2019, I think operators at the GSMA start discussing, strategically what was going on, what was the situation. So we saw at that time connectivity services flattening. There was no growth on connectivity services, and we had in front of us a huge challenge in terms of technology development and deployment with 5G. Okay. And it was the moment in which we start thinking on how to monetize the investment in 5G that we were going to make. We didn't have a way to do it. And for that reason, in February 2020, we launched the Operator Platform Group at the GSMA. Okay? This group has been working since then to define this platform, to define the way operators are going to expose the capabilities, and has gathered the participation of more than 45 operators worldwide and 30 technology partners. So it's I would say, a very wide collaboration initiative. In the last 5-10 years, we have also seen quite a lot of progress in the IT domain, no? In the digitalization process in the IT domain. We have been collaborating very actively with the TM Forum on the definition of the open digital architecture and also on the open API group to define how the different modules in an IT system interconnect to each other through APIs. Okay? And this is a very, very good basis on top of which do the next step, that is digitalizing our network. Okay? And also modularize the network and make the network accessible through APIs as our IT systems are. And there is finally another important trend, and if you look at the last 3 years, 2 of which we were locked down, by the way, so I mean, it's a significant progress in the situation in which we were. There has been plenty of initiatives launched by the telco industry in bodies that are not traditional telco bodies. In bodies like Linux Foundation, okay, that is the space where software and cloud technologies are developed. We have examples of projects launched in the last 3 years, like Anuket, like Nifio, like Silva, like Camara, all of them looking at how can we transform our telecommunication network in cloud-based networks. That is the basis to build on top a digital service architecture. And all this, is probably what has made us think at this moment that we are better prepared. No? And the reason why 25 operators in the framework of the GSMA signed in February this year the Open Gateway Agreement with the commitment to launch commercially API services this year. Okay? So we are now somehow not just confident that we have probably the opportunity from a technical perspective to make it, but also that we have a commercial opportunity that we want to make a reality. No? When we want to somehow deploy this and develop and deploy these digital services, the data and API layer is a relevant one. Okay? By no means I want to say that it's not important. It is extremely relevant to be able to expose capabilities, but you need to do also a lot of work in the underlying network and IT systems to make it possible. Okay? Nevertheless, I think we have the next hours to go deeper into this data and API layer, and well, I don't want to take more time. Really.
Thank you. Juan Carlos, thank you very much. So, whilst Juan Carlos makes his way back to the desk, we're going to just have a quick look in at the viewer poll we have for this session, because as you know, we have a dedicated poll for each of our sessions this year. Here's the question we are asking you for this session. What are the challenges for DSPs in launching a commercial API-based solution? And we've given you 5 examples there. Don't forget, you can pick more than one answer, whichever ones you think are the most important. It's on the TelecomTV website now, so if you're watching online, and for those in the room as well, get your phones out, get your laptops out, take a look, cast your votes, and we will look at the current state of voting towards the end of this session. Right, now we've got a number of talking points we want to get through, so let's move it on to the first one. And when we're talking about APIs and data here, opening up the network capabilities, what network capabilities are we actually talking about? You know, we're not just talking about voice and messaging, are we? That's something we've had before. We've got to be more valuable than that. Can we at least try and identify what some of these services could enable? What are we talking about? Juan Carlos, why don't you start us off and we'll go around to some of our guests.
Yeah, well, in general, operators at this moment are not restricting themselves when exposing capabilities to a specific network or service capabilities. Okay. So we are not just focusing on the traditional services like you mentioned, voice or messaging. In the Open Gateway initiative I mentioned in the opening, the 25 operators are committing to launch a number of APIs that are part of several or different API categories. No? That is what you probably are asking for. No? There are some of them associated to network information and quality of service control that probably are the ones that are more innovative because were not available in the past. And these are having a growing interest. In fact, most of the demos at Mobile World Congress, the use cases were based on quality on demand for mobile networks. But we have many others providing network information and device information that can be useful for the application developer. There are many others that are more traditional, associated to identity management, associated to security and privacy, very interesting for fraud management and fraud control, like for instance, SIM swap information, SIM swap API, or verify location. Both of them help to be sure that, or to identify if there is a potential fraud based on a replacement of identity. We have also APIs associated to payments, to the retail segment, like carrier billing, and verify the identity, that are associated to retail, and finally others that are trying to look for providing an optimal connectivity for edge computing services.
Okay, so there's some clear categorizations here. Should we ask our other 2 operators on the panel for their thoughts? And what about yourself? You know, are you already identifying and categorizing what these services are?
Yeah, no, definitely. I see them in probably 3 groups. So you have those traditional APIs which run as a business today, whether it's calls and SMS. But then you have the next group, which is more the advanced APIs, and we've started to deliver products into market. So good 2 examples is under our Smart Digits portfolio called Line Busy, so you can help banks and financial institutions understand when customers are on the call, and then combining that with other data, you can start to understand whether there's any risks or threats. And then obviously number verify as well, so that's really understanding when people are on the call on their phones and really help seamless authentication. So I think that's the more advanced APIs, and then I'm really excited to see what the next phase will involve, and that's more around 5G related APIs. I like the point you mentioned around mobile edge computing, so maybe site selection around mobile edge computing or network slicing as well.
Great, thanks, Sandeep. Alexandra, what about you're seeing at BT?
Well, first of all, can we make sure that we do say that voice and messaging is still important? I think you said maybe not, but so there is still definitely value as far as voice and messaging is concerned. But in the wider piece, I'll just pick up that piece around 5G. The world is becoming very much around real-time data. Our customers are expecting us to be able to provide new services into them on the back of that real time. And that's absolutely where we are working with customers by segment. When we look at the industries that we are supporting, in those particular industry verticals, our customers are looking for us to help them with the data based on the 5G network. Some of it is for their solutions. So if we think about a real-time situation in a port where we look at geospatial, where we look at asset tracking, all of those pieces are what we're helping those customers with their data. So absolutely, 5G enabling APIs and data.
Thanks very much, Sean. What do you hear from the wider community, your customers?
Yeah, so we think this is a super exciting area for us to partner with the operators to go to market. So a lot of my answers are going to be super similar to the answers that were given already by Juan Carlos and the other operators, because we're working with that community, right? We were a founding member of Camara, but precisely because we see a value in the operators working together to expose common APIs. The initial solutions around location identification or location discovery is obviously super exciting for us as people pick where, being able to respond with the latency characteristics or the available compute in a particular location, so people can make decisions about that. And obviously the quality on demand side from an application provider is nirvana, right? That's fantastic. So all the work in the short term that's being done in there is all super exciting. And then as we progress and we work closer with our partners like our friends at Nokia and Ericsson to look at the underlying technology and what can be exposed to the intelligence, the telemetry information that's exposed between the UE and the BBU, if those make sense to the operators to expose it as well, we see the opportunity for new services and new capabilities to be built around that. From our perspective, that standardization across the operators makes it easier for us to expose to our 68,000 plus partners in the Azure ecosystem so that we can get these services to scale very quickly, right? The trick here is finding which APIs drive adoption, doubling down on those, and really getting them in use so that the operators are incented to build around them. And that, of course, brings the follow along with the developer community in hunting for innovation. So I think that's super exciting.
Great, thanks very much. As far from a vendor perspective, and again, you've got a lot of exposure with telcos out there. What do you say?
I think you have to go back to the fundamental question: where are you adding value as you evolve through this journey of the data and the API? If you look at the previous decade, mobile data, all the services that surrounded that created an enormous amount of value for the society and the economy. In this decade, what we're seeing is a build-up on top of that. So what's the new value creation that's going to come? So when we talk about what kind of APIs we're talking about, there are APIs and data that you're using internally within the telecom environment. For automation, you need data for that. For creation of new services, you need data for that. But what's really different in this decade is that we're now opening up the APIs for the third-party developers that we have actually never managed to do in a serious way previously. And the new value that we're talking about is really coming from those enterprise, Industry 4.0 type customers. And quite frankly, we tried, but we realized that we don't really fully understand their operational environment. So there are people who are much better at that in the SI world, in the operational technology world. So when we look at the requirements from those customers, the value we can help create in that environment by opening up our networks via these APIs in a controlled manner, in a secure manner. But when we look at the big picture around that, we see an enormous amount of value being created. So I think from that point of view, that's just a natural evolution from the last couple of decades, using that internally, now really taking it to the fore to the external industries and helping them grow.
Yeah. That's good points, good points. And then what about the Redhats perspective here?
So we have been, well, Juan Carlos mentioned, right, with Open Gateway initiative, there is a series of operators out there that are going into that journey of APIs. We have seen that the building of the platform that they're going to need for exposure of those APIs is coming as a constant requirement now. There is one thing that I do see is that most of the API and there is incredible work that has been done. I think Juan Carlos mentioned Linux Foundation Camara project into unifying, how those APIs are going to be built. But there is most of the work that is being done so far is regarding how to access the residential, which is the massive part of the subscriber database. There is, of course, a huge potential, a huge opportunity. I think you were mentioning on the enterprise side. Now, it is not the same way that you're going to expose enterprise APIs that you're going to expose APIs for the general public. And I think this is one of the challenges that they would have to go through, and they're navigating through right now while they are building those layers that they're going to need for exposing the APIs.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I really want to see how this develops in the coming months. Maria, can I just pick up on something that was mentioned earlier? I think Juan Carlos mentioned it about especially the mobile edge computing APIs and that sort of category. And the work you're doing, I remember it's a good idea to explain what some of the work that you do, but how do you see the value of APIs in your business and the services that you're enabling?
I mean, it's absolutely necessary. We build an orchestration tool built out of microservices. So those microservices talk to each other using interfaces. And the way that we see the industry evolving is that we need to make applications that consume connectivity in a very simple way. So I was having a conversation the other day with one of our partners, and they were talking to me and saying to me, you know what, it's great working with you because we just hit API.send, and we don't care. It's magic. It just happens to arrive into our backend. They don't care about the technology. They don't care about the complexity of what's going. We just abstract all of that for them to be able to match their user requirements to whatever they need from the network. And that is what we intend to achieve. But also, being a microservice, you mentioned identity, right? So we offer identity as a service, right? When we work with all these Open RAN companies and they want to implement zero trust, so they leverage our identity services for that. Or we use monitoring to feed into an AI XApp, for example. So yes, it is about engaging with the developer community that sits on the application layer, as we understand application layer and user application, but also there is an ecosystem of creating value within the network through these apps that will leverage our services to build those applications. And that is edge, center, and left, right, all sides of the network, yes.
That's good, really good to hear, and good points to get across. Thank you. Juan Carlos, is this approach that the telcos are talking about, is this really about creating a kind of federated middleware that facilitates these high-level services from developers?
Well, really what GSMA Open Gateway, Camara initiatives are doing is creating a kind of abstraction layer, that provides an operating system that developers can use to program applications that make use of the capabilities. So it is a very, very good tool, to be able to run, to foster the development of innovative services, because they allow the application developer to focus on really capabilities like augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, sensoring, whatever, drones, and forget about the complexity of the network and the computing, okay? And this is the way probably we will see all these use cases that we expect from 5G happening. They still are not probably happening at the scale because application developers don't have access to the capabilities in the same way they have access to computing and storage capabilities in public cloud providers, in the same easy way with a simple API and through an environment that they can integrate with in their development of applications.
And Sandeep, is this something that you see would be of value to developers and ultimately, your enterprise customers?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you've got to think about it in 4 segments, like a target market. So you have your hyperscalers and your aggregators as one or 2 pools, and then you've got your ISVs, developers, and then potentially your end enterprises. And each of those will have a different way of trying to consume these APIs. So maybe a marketplace will be great for those end enterprises creating point solutions, or the ISVs. But then, of course, as we serve APIs today for these aggregators and hyperscalers, you're going to need a middleware platform that will deliver the APIs in bulk, right? So where they're going to be consuming mass amounts of APIs and then serving those to their end customer. So it's tailoring the platform and approach depending on the end customer as well.
Great, thanks. Alexandra, from your perspective, this idea of abstracting and making it a lot easier for developers. We're going to see some interesting innovations, hopefully, with this approach.
I think everybody wants easy in life, don't they, for a start. I think there are a couple of things. When we think about that middleware, as Maria says, you've got to be able to create an ecosystem and make it easy for the ecosystem to come together and to collaborate together. I think on one of the other panels, there was a talk about, what can we learn from other industries? Well, if we look at financial services, at BT, we've had the pleasure of supporting, most of the world's stock exchanges and helping them transport their market data around the world for over 30 years with our Radiance platform. That's a platform where we have APIs and where we have data coming into it. And there we created the ability to be able to come in for those organizations to interact. But that's very much around a commonality of language, a protocol language. And maybe one of the things for us all to develop and co-create together, we might need to think about what ancillary organizations and ancillary industries have done and whether we need to create something around that commonality. So is there a commonality around language? We've been talking about the joint platforms, but is there a language protocol as well as a middleware piece? And as for developers, there will be places for developers where they just want a plain API where they can ingest the data and go out and innovate with all of those new user cases that we're starting to see across 5G when we start to think about the digital visions and taking images from cameras, applying APIs and artificial intelligence and coming out with that. And then at the other end, I think that when we look at the smaller end, there are SMEs that also want to innovate. But actually, they perhaps want a little bit of help as well. And that's where we as an ecosystem coming together, and whether that help is from integration, whether that help is from a skills point of view. At BT, we obviously have our Skills for Tomorrow program that we help at the other end. So ecosystem, skills, middleware, perhaps a protocol so that we've got the language, and then bringing all of it together.
Sean, do you want to come with some comments there?
Yeah, so I think Maria really nailed it on the nose when she talked about the simplicity. In the end, this is all about the simplicity of the developer experience, because without it, you don't get scale, which you won't get interest, you won't get investment, right? That's pretty straightforward. And so I'll be honest, I have a little bit of a reaction when someone says middleware, because all I think of is bloat. and if that's what it becomes, then you're done, right? Because that interferes with the developer experience. So to the extent that we can work within the standards organizations to get a lot of that intent-based processing into the underlying API and native to the exposure of that to the developer, so you don't need this intervening stuff to actually make it easy for the developers to use, my personal opinion is you're going to be in a better place. From our perspective, right, we expose to a very large Microsoft developer community. We're very, very focused on ease of developer use, because that's in essence your consumers of those services. And to the extent that there's a sort of, very smart API with very little overhead associated with it, they adopt it. And when, and there is a case to be made for these bigger implementations, and this is a starting market, so we'll be open and flexible about how we approach it. But again, in the end, focus on ease of developer, not very, very heavy implementations.
Thanks, Sean. Before we continue, because we want to look at the developer situation in more detail, I think it's a good opportunity we ask our audience if there's any questions from the floor. Anyone in the audience got a question for any of our panelists? Or there's a hand up in the middle.
Francis Hayes from Apple Door Research. There's a saying attributed to Einstein that madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I have personal history. My brother was head of an API initiative called Bondi about 10, 12 years ago. What has been described today, particularly by the operators, is the same sort of process. It's a standards process. It's coordinating people. It's agreeing standards for APIs. Maybe they'll come out, maybe we'll try them in the future. If you compare that with where APIs have been extremely successful, if you take the hyperscalers in terms of exposing APIs, they don't do it that way. They're about APIs getting them out there, getting them used by developers, finding out where the flaws are, and all the rest of it. I'm hearing the same story of 10, 12 years ago. I'm not hearing a new story which is about APIs that in the end will be used by developers. My question is, what is it we are doing differently? What can we do differently in CSPs? And do we need a complete kind of rethink about the way we go about this? Should we see CSPs as actually, say for Telefónica, for example, actually introducing its own APIs without waiting for 20 other operators to agree on those standards and maybe winning in the market?
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy that you make this question, because I think we share the same experience that you had. I think we didn't do things right in the past, and that we need now to have a different approach. Okay? And that is the reason why Telefónica has launched the Open Gateway early adopter programs. We have launched it, not just Telefónica, it's together with Azure, together with Google, together with AWS, together with Vonage, to give access to our APIs to the developer ecosystem so that they can use them in their applications over production networks. So we are not talking about a lab exercise. It's API really acting on our networks. And this is the only way to capture their feedback, to understand if what we are selling is really of value for them. If we have to change in the way we provide the APIs or in the kind of features that we offer them, okay, we need to understand which one are interesting to them. But I'm totally with you, and Telefónica is not the single operator doing this. The SMA Early Adopter Program is also including other 4 or 5 operators that are having similar experiences with aggregators, hyperscalers, OTT providers, trying to, precisely do what you meant, no? Connecting with the developer community to be sure that what we are doing is the right thing. Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments for Francis's question, or should we move on? Are you happy to move on? Or?
Just a quick comment, really. Somebody talked about the horses for courses this morning. I think when we look at a homogeneous environment, it's practical to do what is being suggested, which is go out there, issue the APIs, people will use, and you'll find out how they work. When we look at some of the telecom environment, it's not really a homogeneous system. There's a lot of heterogeneity there. There's a lot of legacy there. So that's where the discussion happens around the abstraction layer. So can we create a thin enough abstraction layer that will bring the homogeneity to the developers so they don't have to learn and worry about all the heterogeneous elements? So I think that's probably a way of looking at it, and absolutely lots of initiatives in the past that failed. Why would it work this time is because we have a lot more homogeneity coming, particularly in the cloud environment.
Great, thanks.
Can I add to that?
Maria.
That problem was solved by the IT industry with enterprise messaging systems probably 20 years ago. They encountered an issue that was they had largely heterogeneous pieces of software wanting to talk to each other, and they created enterprise messaging systems, which companies like Red Hat use a lot to make software talk to each other using messaging systems. So an API is not more than that. It's just a way to transact messaging and information. So when you were saying how can we learn from other industries and adopt protocols and best practices, we have it. Sometimes in the telecoms industry, we tend to believe that we have the most difficult problems to solve. But sometimes there are other industries that have encountered similar problems, maybe at a lower magnitude, but we can learn from that and adopt that. And just orchestration tools, they are largely different pieces of software talking to each other, and they do that with links that are built out of messaging systems. So that can help.
if I may, operators we are very good at defining APIs, but in many cases with 25 parameters, very complex to understand. So it's not so easy, as probably our colleague was asking, to define and develop an API that is simple to use, no? Like the ones you find in the cloud environments, no? It's one click, you can do a lot of things. No complexity. We do complex APIs very well. The simple ones is something that we still have to, further evolve towards that.
Okay, thanks everyone. Let's move it along a little bit, because a phrase I came across last month when I was looking at some of these questions was API sprawl. Whether that exists or not, I don't know, but it's certainly been discussed in a lot of the communities out there. Is there an API sprawl at the moment, and therefore is a collective approach from telcos the best way to avoid adding to this and adding to the complexity? So enabling developers just to go to one point where they're going to get access to the whole community of telcos.
Yes, we thought it was the right thing to do when we signed the Open Gateway agreement. In fact, there in that agreement, we decided to use a single repository for these APIs that the customer is going to use for their applications, and it's the Camara initiative, Linux Foundation. We know that there are many other organizations developing APIs. They are fantastic ones, and all of them are contributing to Camara. So it's not that we are forgetting about the other organizations developing APIs. So we need probably the effort of the industry, but we need to have a single repository. We cannot tell the developer, for this API you need to go there, and for this other API you need to go somewhere else. I think we need to make things easy for them. And I think the way to make things easy for them is offer them a repository and a single way of using naming conventions, error codes. I mean, different organizations have different ways of expressing APIs. We need a single language, and we need a single repository.
I hear this, and I also hear Francis's comment from earlier on that we've been along similar routes or related routes before, and it's up to us as an industry to push it this time. Sandeep, what are your thoughts about a collective approach? Is this still the right way to go to make it easier for developers?
Yeah, no, I think so. The API sprawl is definitely a challenge. If you think about it for a customer or a bank or a financial institution, they're going to have end customers that are going to be on multiple mobile networks. And if you think about if each operator had their own specific API with a whole set of parameters, that's going to create lots of complexity and that sprawl. So numberverify.org, if you've not had a chance to have a look at that site, it's a great website that tells you more about how a number of operators are using a standard API, and then there's, of course, aggregators that are pulling that together. So for the banks, you get the consistency, and you get that coverage as well. So it makes it meaningful and impactful very quickly as well.
Any other comments about the collective approach, really, to avoid complexity?
So one, I'll offer a personal opinion, because I wasn't an operator for 20 years, and so that's going to leak out. And then there's what we're seeing in the market. So what we're seeing in the market is, again, we believe that a broad scale implementation across the operators, not a standards-based one, but getting, that's why, to answer how the Camara Alliance is different, is they went in with this mindset, we're going to get a mass of operators that can then go pick some APIs and prove that they work or they don't work, and we'll move on. Now, as that alliance grows bigger and you get more people involved, is it going to devolve to sort of more the standards approach? Let's hope not, right? So from our perspective, we create a unifying function. We have something called Azure Programmable Connectivity that takes all of these APIs that we get from the different operators and exposes out them to our developer community, because that's what a developer ecosystem is. Those are the folks that learn to use your APIs. API sprawl happens when it gets too broad. So that's one route. Now, on the flip side, we have other operator partners that do believe in their region they have a unique reason to create value, where they want to create a more closed ecosystem where they're going to have people come through them. Awesome. It's all an onboard to our services, so I'll just plug my APIs into that. And if they're successful, awesome, because it drives Azure usage. And if the other route goes forward and we get to scale with a more sort of open solution, great. It still comes to Azure. Like that's, as we think through this, right? And there's no reason as the operators start to expose the network as a platform that they shouldn't experiment with multiple on-ramps, because in the end, you don't have to be right to win, right? So let's just, let's choose as many options as you can to get stuff on there. It's a choice of, whether you think you have a unique market advantage by locking in one route or not. And so, it's pretty early to call whether that's going to happen or not. I do think the point out earlier about don't replicate the nobody moves till everyone agrees and stand and hold hands and step forward, like that's just, the industry will overtake that and move forward. And the risk there is while they're busy figuring out the 10 things people don't buy, people will just de facto use one of the ones that they do buy and race forward with it. And that's what you want to avoid.
Thanks, Sean. That's great. Maria?
No, nothing to add. I absolutely agree with that. Like, unless you do it, someone does it, it will be adopted. That's it. The developer community needs access to network, as they have access to compute and storage. Yeah. That's it. So
that is the main crux of it then.
That's it. Like we don't have anything else to do. We need to provide them with access to our capabilities.
Well, a network is your core foundation. What was it? The wise man said, you build your house upon the rocks. So your rock is your network, and actually you have to get that foundational piece right. You get that right, you build the APIs, and you can innovate from there.
Exactly, wireless. It's just everywhere, right?
Well, let's move this along in a second. But Hanan, let's come to you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that there's, because I referred before about the opportunity, and this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity for operators to actually create the API, be the API for the network services and edge services. I think there is, of course, it's a journey. The developer experience has to be there. The tools for the developers have to be there so that API can be actually useful for them. But there is I haven't seen not many opportunities. I think the approach that you are taking now with regards of, I went through GSM One API. I was at a telco operator at that time. I was in charge of implementation of the GSM One API at one of the operators. And the thing is, when you sit or when you are on the developer shoes, then you realize that but that time, you say, I have to actually implement 3 APIs or more than 3 APIs to 3 different operators to actually reach out the customer, which is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And now is we have this opportunity, and you have this opportunity now to become that one API, right, that any developer in the world can use independently, that is somewhere in Argentina or somewhere in China, and using the same API to address exactly and build the same application that could be used worldwide.
Yeah. I want to add one thing here, picking up on the usefulness of the APIs and how they're used. Ultimately, we have to deliver the capabilities that our customers will use to open up these APIs. If I look at 10 years ago, our customer base was just communication service providers. I look at my customer base today, it is the enterprises, it is the operational technology guys in the industry 4.0, it is the IT guys, and look what the web scalers and the metaverse guys are doing. So when I look at all my requirements coming from all of these customer segments, what we are finding is that there's a segment which is really far advanced, which is the web scalers. So when we engage with them, the early learnings that we're getting out of that, we learn from that experience, and then we share that out with others, right? How web scalers are doing it. And by the way, you are already running a lot of your services in the web scale environment, so you can take advantage of those learnings. Yeah. But it does come down to what's useful and what's not, and how applicable and readily available will that be. But that collective learning from all these segments has been super useful. Yeah.
Great, good points, excellent points. I'd like to sort of come back to something that, Alexandra, you mentioned in your last response and build on that. Is it enough for a DSP, a telco, to simply offer the APIs, or do they need to create more of a support program for developers? Do they need to engage more and embrace them more? And if so, how much effort and resources do you have to put into nurturing that community and that relationship?
Well, sometimes the community is with us, or sometimes it's with our partners. We have a partner ecosystem. Some of those are the hyperscalers. Some of those are the wider partners that we have as part of our organization. And actually, it's a question of, do we want to support the developers directly with our APIs, or do we want to support the developers indirectly, working with partners, like what Sean's doing with their developer program that they've got there.
And Sean, just how complex is the relationship with developers?
So, we obviously pour pour a fair amount of investment in the developer community. They are our customers. We have products for them. They use it. We obviously encourage them to consume the services and use the tooling we provided. A lot of the investments, you look at the early investments we did with some of the GPT stuff is all about creating Copilot, which is helping developer productivity. In fact, our API program, the Azure Programmable Connectivity, was built using Copilot assistance. So it's really, really cool technology. So you want to invest in that. So again, it's all back to where your business model is. Like, do you feel like you have a particular area or a market or a lock in a particular area where you think you can build around that and uniquely meet that area, those needs? Great, invest in that. Like, in my previous job, we had a platform that had roughly a couple million people on it because we had 3 industries where we had a front, those were clear winners for IoT technologies for us. So we invested in that and focused on that community. However, when we opened up and started opening up the developer community so that we partnered with the hyperscalers, the one I work for now, as well as some of the other ones that are out there, that platform grew into the tens of millions of adoptees. And so, again, you didn't want to be right, you want to get usage, right? So we had we had a set of early folks that we went deep with that worked very well. And then on the flip side, we could also cast a broader net by tying into existing ecosystems, and that worked very well. So again, it's all about, one of the good things is one of the strengths that operators have is they know their local market. They know in many cases, they have amazing relationships both at the government level and with the enterprises that they service. So they can target those areas specifically and still work with the broader community to draw folks in to create value.
Thanks, Sean. And, Juan Carlos, what about Telefónica's approach with developers? Do you take the approach from a group perspective, or is it more regionalized?
No, we are making from a group perspective, but engaging with the local operations because they are the ones providing the network that serves the APIs, no? And then in every big markets, we have a program where we are making the APIs available and, with early access to some developers to be able to capture their experience. And this is an effort, but you need to make it. So we were commenting before, so you need the customer voice in the design, in the development, and then finally in the commercial launch. So absolutely necessary.
Sandeep, do you have to put the effort in to creating these relationships with developers, or do you rely more on your partners and ecosystems?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think with the Telefonica program, if you've not seen that, that's the Wire, Telefonica's Open Innovation Hub, has recently launched the Open Gateway Activation Program. And that's a great initiative, attracting those developers and early stage startups. And there's some great support there in terms of helping them with the right skills, business development support, and then also really importantly, investment as well to help these startups grow. So I think one of those types of initiatives are really important, and all the operators getting behind that. And of course, then also creating solutions to start to showcase those APIs. So for example, if you need something to demonstrate quality of demand with 5G, it's important to work with a partner and start showcasing some of those solutions to get people excited and see the value at the early stages.
Right. In that case, I think we should open up to questions from our audience again. So if anyone in our audience has a question on this point, then, there's a question over on the right-hand side. Looks like Neil.
I just wonder, it's kind of a build on Francis's point. Why don't I just buy all this from Twilio? I can have it right now, and it works really well.
That's a great point. I was actually having a conversation before that. So while the entire telecoms industry was discussing how difficult it was to share the SMS system, they went ahead, they bypassed everyone, they created it, and now they are a multi-billion-dollar company worrying about problems that, multi-billion-dollar companies have. So that's why your point was very valid in the point of like, if you don't make it, someone else will, and it will work, and it will be adopted, and yeah, it's a really, really great point, Neil.
They have 40% market share, and actually, numberchange.org, the thing you pointed out, when you go and click on where can I buy this from, Twilio is the first thing that comes up, not any of the other carriers that you could buy. Yeah. It's like we've got to get beyond this lowest common denominator approach to launching capabilities. Get it out there, and by getting it out there and doing it first, become the de facto standard, as opposed to trying to agree the lowest common denominator. It just isn't working for us.
Thanks, Neil. Any other comments from Neil's suggestion there?
I have a parallel that I always draw from another industry because I always try and think outside of the box and what other industries are doing and how we can adopt innovation, right? So this is the cryptocurrency exchanges, right? Cryptocurrency exchanges offer all of their data via APIs, and they are markets that are open 24 hours. Everyone can access all of this information, much like Bloomberg would sell this trading data, but for millions, they give it for free. But each exchange has its own API, right? But there's a DeFi industry which is worth trillions of dollars around software that pulls out those APIs, homogenizes it using a very thin software layer of translation, and sells trading services as a service to the developer community that then creates trading bots and so on and so forth. There are probably, I don't know, hundreds of exchanges worldwide operating 24 hours, and it was not a problem that they were all different. Someone found a solution for it.
So we're going to look outside of telecoms for some more inspiration and some blue sky thinking here. Really progress things. Right, okay. Any more questions from the floor in that case? Anyone? Oh. Francis is running down his quota.
It's not a question, but it's actually just, Alexandra has said actually earlier, she talked about the major fact that BT is a major supplier to stock exchanges. That didn't come from being a telco. That came from working the acquisition of the Reuters capability. It came through a whole look at what do we need to do to deliver to stock exchanges, applications and trading. It didn't come from here's a set of telco APIs that the stock exchanges can use. So I think the answer is actually hidden in the panel. The telcos have done this, but they can be quite often hidden away in this area. So not a question.
Thanks for the observation, then, Francis. Thank you. Any comments on Francis's observation, or are we going to move on? Let's move on then in that case, because we've got a few more minutes left, about 15 minutes left. There's a few more things we want to talk about. What about, Juan Carlos, what about platform resilience and extensibility? Because these services, they do need to scale, they need to be fast, they need to be responsive, they need to be future-proofed as well. They've got to work into the next decade, hopefully. So how do we achieve that resilience?
Well, you need to think about resilience in the platform and also in the underlying network and capabilities. No? That is really where telecom operators have the biggest challenge. No? Many of our networks are based on legacy technologies that you cannot probably access by software. No? And then probably the first step is digitalizing your assets and migrating to technologies that are cloud native and that facilitate the exposure of network capabilities, like the 5G standalone core, no, with the network exposure functionality and all the stuff. Same thing is happening with the radio access network, with the transport network, with the service platform. So you need first to have these platforms, really ready, and then build on top the resilient platform. Again, operators will have to work hard on this platform development. We are in Telefónica for 7 years already on the job, so with some experience on that. But as you say, it's fundamental, no? Because you will have millions of applications running on top simultaneously, all of them expecting, the API calls to be served. Okay, so it is a challenge, but not different to the challenge of any other service or application that we are having in our networks. Think about the millions of calls we handle, the millions of SMS that we exchange on billions, every minute. So that won't be an issue. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
So the risk there is that the way that's written, again, I'm reacting to, is if you build your API calls to the same level of resiliency and survivability that you do to handle 911 calls for a service you're probably getting 1/10 of a cent per dip on, you could make money. Seems unlikely, right? So the question is you talked about Twilio earlier, right? Well, great. Twilio is a monetization opportunity. Great. They have a community. They have developed. Expose your stuff. Make your money through them, right? Is one option. Similarly here, you just have to be very cognizant of this, the value of the service you're getting. Don't overpromise on what you're delivering on, and then make sure you're sized to the revenue stream you expect to get for that. The risk is always is that and again, this is back, this is one of the dangers of the process right now, is more of the traditional telephony industry gets involved in some of these standards, some of these industry efforts, is you start veering back to one sort of gold standard for every service. And the promise with 5G and network slicing is that you're going to start to be able to scale the way that you implement the network with different cost, performance, and security trade-offs, and be able to size the cost of the service you deliver based on what the economic, viability of that product is. And if you lose that because you take everything back down to this, gold standard that you're traditionally held to, again, I think folks are going to struggle. That doesn't say that you should throw quality to the wind and not worry about it. I'm saying but let your purchasers, let the application developers make that trade-off, as long as you consciously expose that to them and let them make that selection versus making it for them and then delivering a service to market that's overpriced or unusable because of the complexity. And I think that's the real danger in some of that thinking.
Thanks, Sean. Alexander, did you want to come in on that?
I was just going to say, there is an expectation, though, that resiliency is about security, that we do provide the security to anybody who is coming into our organization, whether you are a small organization or you're a developer in a large organization. You want to know that you've got that wrap around you, that you feel safe and secure when you're coming to the platform. So for me, resiliency, 100% about security.
Great, thanks. And any other comments?
I was just going to say that there's a caveat to get it out there, let the developers tell the customers whether it's secure or safe and reliable or not. I think there's a segmentation issue here as well, that there are a lot of services that do not require that super duper 5.9 resilience that we are accustomed to building for. When you look at the critical nature of the network, the services that we are providing, we are a $2 trillion industry, but we are supporting the $80 trillion economy globally, right? The entire society runs on these networks. So there will be customers in healthcare, in other areas of society where having the reliability for certain services, not all, will be very critical. But we can solve that problem in an isolated manner. So we don't have to build a generic platform which is 5.9 available all the time. But for certain customer segments, we can take care of that.
Great, good points. Thanks very much indeed. If there's any other points to make, we'll Hanan?
Yeah, no, I think is Sean was mentioning about the trade-off, right? Is between going fast, fail fast, right? Mm-hmm. And I understand that it's not easy, being a service provider. We build services, for to stand and be reliable. And the opposite, on the opposite spectrum, we have the developers that are actually, in this mode of building fast, failing fast, what is next and how we build that. So the operator need to find that trade-off between, I understand the security, reliability of the services have to be there because this has been one of the brand, values of the brand of the telco, right? And but now when we are approaching this new world of digital services, then you need to be to the pair of all the others. They were mentioned in Twilio. Twilio wasn't built in one day, right? It's been in the market for more than 10 years. I remember we were doing one API, and Twilio was there already. So there is an ecosystem. Developers, I think we mentioned that before, right? Developers are there, need to be there. It's not having a developer program is not an option. It's a necessity for whatever you're going to be building. How to get on, how to tap into those developers community is up to you. To how to address them directly or indirectly, as we was mentioning. Example, one of the largest developers programs out there is the open source community. Mm-hmm. We are just millions of developers out there. How can we get access to that technology that you are building? How can we directly embed that in the technology that we are building? And I think you already are in the right path to tap into that big community out there. There is much more that still needs to be done in terms of the toolings and providing all those capabilities in an easy way, in the experience way that developers are waiting. But definitively, yeah, think about this trade-off. I think it's going to be a constant discussion into, do I build a quick, this is a new API that we need to put out? Yes, but I don't have the fine lines behind it. Do we need it? And that's going to be, I think, the constant movement into that journey that you're going through right now.
Thanks, Hanan. Good points. Thank you very much indeed. We've got time for one final talking point, but before we do, just a reminder to our online audience, for all these sessions, please send in any questions you've got, because we are monitoring the questions and we will try and raise them as and when we can. Final point for us to talk about on this session then, Juan Carlos. How can the DSPs and the public cloud providers, how can they collaborate and work together in this new API business?
Well, there are many ways, no? But the essential one, public cloud providers have fantastic development environments with a lot of functionality, providing an easy access to computing, storage, and a lot of functionality as a service. The network APIs can be part of that portfolio and complement, what they offer to the developer community. So, on one side, I think they can provide a place to host the APIs and reach the developer ecosystems. No? They also can bring a lot of experience, no? And collaborating with them, with Microsoft, we are doing quite a lot of things. Helps us also to understand how to build those APIs, no? in a way that are easy to use, easy to manage, and easy to understand. No? And I think that style, this is something we were discussing before, is the style we need to give to the APIs. Okay, and also start thinking on a way in the standardization of the APIs that is not so much, setting the standards, but on the telecom side, but let the customer decide what are the standards by choosing the APIs they like. Okay, so let's provide a rich set of APIs, and then the customer will decide. Okay, these ones become standard because are the ones I like, and adoption will drive them and take them to standards. Okay, and I think this kind of thinking is probably thinking that we are bringing from these cloud providers that have a long experience on exposing capabilities in a friendly way to developers.
I mean, Sean, the collaboration between cloud providers and telcos has been going on a while now, but specifically in the API business, what's your advice? How can the two work together even more productively than they are now?
Yeah, I'm super excited. You can see me nodding a lot while Juan Carlos was talking, because we're spot on aligned on this, right? The Kamara Alliance was awesome, and we appreciate having the opportunity to participate in it, because it was the time where our operator partners came to us and invited us in to participate and collaborate with them on that, so we could bring the best of what we had, and then it also give the operator community a chance to have a very firm viewpoint on what was important to them, the control points that they wanted to see done. So it was a great collaboration opportunity. And to the extent we can continue that on, that's fantastic. From a personal perspective, I think sort of sometimes this is pitted as a competition between the two, and I don't see that at all. In other words, there's a set of unique capabilities generated by somebody who owns spectrum and has a network in the ground that's not replicatable any other place. Awesome. I don't plan to build one of those. So to the extent that we can extend that to our developers, they'll use those capabilities. They'll build programs that consume Azure resources. We all win.
Yeah.
Right? So looking for a way to drive adoption, looking for a way to drive scale. This is all about adoption and scale. I previously in my old job, I used to mention there's been more blood spilled over money that's never come in as people try to worry about who's going to get what market share for something that's never been launched. Don't think those are productive activities. The notion of us working together, the notion of finding from the developer community together about where value is creating and pouring effort into that and bringing it to scale, that is the right way for us to work together. And that's why we're super aligned. And again, back to the question earlier, how is the Kamara effort different? I think the folks that came up with Kamara, the founding vision, was something that was much more structured around let's find out what works together in the market and win, and let's play to the strengths of the operators and the unique value pool that they create and take that to market. And as people are thinking that through, think about where you have your unique value point, and more importantly, how you can drive adoption across as many people as fast as possible. And then, as you get experience with it, you'll be able to identify those unique pools where you probably can be a little more structured and maybe take a little bit more of the value. But remember, I mean, Microsoft's a platform. This is all about being a platform. When you listen to Satya talks, he talks about how much money is generated by our partners, because that's where it adds value. We're not going to be experts in everything, right? You don't run a phone company and become an expert in industrial control systems like in 2 days, right? That seems like an unrealistic objective. But you can find partners that are going to do that, can drive adoption of your services, and the more you can incent them and bring them in, the happier you're going to be, my opinion.
Great, thanks, Sean. And Alexandra, is there more mileage in the collaboration we can obtain, or telcos can obtain from working with the cloud providers on APIs?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a beautiful symbiosis, whether it's with Sean or with any of the other cloud providers out there. I almost feel like a co-joined twin here for the moment. Yeah. But absolutely, I think that, as you said, we are there, we are building our networks, and it's about everything that we can build on top and monetize on top of that. Working with the cloud providers, working with the developer communities, is that collaboration between the two, so that actually we've got people innovating to be able to create new insights, new businesses that are able to use our networks, that are able to use the cloud providers, and then together, the two pieces together, create brand new businesses that grow economies, which is basically what we all want.
Yeah, indeed it is. And Hanan, let's just expand this question out a bit here. Collaboration, it always comes down to collaboration, doesn't it? The power of collaboration is so beneficial.
Absolutely, and that's a good question, because we have been working with the telco, the service providers, on building the network, helping them building the network in a cloud-native way. It's been a journey, still a journey. But at the same time, we have been working with hyperscalers, with the public service providers, into adding the capabilities as well in there. So that today, with the vision that we have for service provider, they can be running network services in the prem. They can be running that on the public service and exposing those APIs, whatever the workload is running. And that is something that we have been building for a long time. Now we are getting into the helping them into, how to build those layers for exposing the APIs themselves, which is going to be through their own platform, or they're going to be through public cloud platforms. The capabilities will be there for that.
Great, thanks, Hanan. And as far as this collaboration, it's not just between the public cloud providers and the telcos, it's the whole ecosystem here.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we have to look at is when we work with all the different kind of customers, including the web scalers, the CSPs, the industrials, what comes out very clearly is that the points of reference are already available in the market. The operating models for using the APIs in an open environment are also established there. One of the pieces that was missing, and that's what Nokia is working very hard on, is that how do we open up our networks, our infrastructure, in a way that it can be consumed by all these multiple customer types? And so when I look at our entire technology strategy and the commercial strategy around that, it's a lot about the openness. 3 years ago, thinking that you'll put the heart of your network, the core network, into a web scale environment which is being managed by somebody else, that was a no-go. But now we are doing that around the world, and the lessons that we're coming out of, that we're getting from that, are very clear. When you put a core network into a web scale environment, it has to work with the automation suite, the software suite in that environment. Well, how do you make that work? Well, you have to go from a couple of dozen of APIs to suddenly several hundred of APIs. So the journey that I have seen in my own organization over the last 2-3 years has been phenomenal in understanding what the other industries are doing. To Maria's point, you've got to learn from them. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that journey for me is going to continue through this decade, because we're talking still about a small segment of the large amount of customers that we could be working with.
Sure, absolutely. And Sandeep, do you see a similar journey? Obviously, it's not the vendor journey, but this is a telco journey. But do you see this as a continuation?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you always got to think about the use case or the end customer need. So if it is something that's really going to help a number of operators, then working with aggregators, I know we mentioned Twilio, it's a great partner of ours, and that makes sense. But then, of course, if it's an enterprise-specific solution with 5G, then working with Nokia and creating that with a private network makes sense as well. So it's really picking the right solution and then building the ecosystem around that with the right partner, whether it's a hyperscaler or a network partner. So taking it case by case.
Great, thanks. Maria, the last word will come to you from your perspective. How important is the relationships between the different elements, between the telcos, between the developers, between yourselves, between the partners, between the public cloud? How important is it, and how do you get more value out of that for pushing this API business further on?
The collaboration and the ecosystem building is essential, because when we try and sell a service to someone, we are connecting to from the hardware to the software to everything up. Like, for example, we're building a mesh node, right, that actually can communicate, makes the application owner to push traffic to 3 different types of networks: satellite, 4G, and peer-to-peer Wi-Fi. And we were experiencing a lot of problems exposing the Wi-Fi capability from the chipset manufacturer itself. So without the possibility of engaging the device manufacturer and saying, hey guys, we need to work together to solve this problem, actually we opened up a problem that they had in their drivers for this particular board. So it made their product better, it made our product better, it made the application developer say, okay, that's great, because I don't have to think about this. So we solved a problem, right? Because we're working with the chip manufacturer, the software developer, even the guys in Korea developing the kernel module. So it's important, because we are not going to create this industry is a monster, right? Who's going to come and just say, like, I'm just going to do it all by myself? It's impossible. And when it comes to cloud, whether it is public cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, whatever you want to call it, and telcos, these are very complementary skills. And I really liked in the panel before when it was said, like, when you need a software developer together with a networks person, because they're going to complement each other a lot. And that's why you working with Microsoft, it's great, because they are going to give you what you need to get to that developer community. So absolutely, we need to collaborate more. We need more co-creation projects. We need to get our hands dirty together and just break things, because that's what the software community is about, breaking things.
As long as we fix them afterwards.
Yeah. We always fix them.
Maria, thank you very much. Everyone, thank you so much indeed. We're almost at the end of our session, but we do want to have a look at the poll we've been running, and just to see what the current voting looks like. What are the challenges for DSPs in launching a commercial API-based solution? And the early voting is, well, it's a little bit tight at the top there. Too slow to market. Others will get there first. Market fragmentation. And I can't quite see the bottom one there. It's obliterated by a countdown clock. So something at the bottom is not seen as a priority. Never mind. Keep voting if you haven't voted already, because we're keeping the polls open all week, and we'll report back in on TelecomTV later. Right, we do need to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Don't forget, everyone in the room, there's a charity pinball tournament with Neil McRae and his 5 pinball machines over in the corner there. See you back here at 4 p.m. when Ray and his guests will be discussing the latest carrier conundrum. Intrigued? Well, join us then and you'll find out what that conundrum is. But first, show your appreciation for our panelists, please. Thank you very much.